My family dismissed me as a burnout, always chasing startups while they clung to the family business. At the annual meeting, they voted to buy me out, cheap. I agreed, smiled, and left. A week later, their company's largest competitor announced a full acquisition, led by me. They didn't see it coming. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. Before we continue, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. My name's Cole Rivers. I'm 38, and until last Tuesday, I was the golden heir of Rivers Industries, born into legacy and privilege. But legacy isn't given, it's earned. My family had other ideas. I walked into their annual board meeting expecting platitudes and pride. Instead, I found whispers and savings. My father sat at the head of the table. Stern, expectant. My siblings hovered near the door. I wasn't there to celebrate. I was there to be erased, politely. The meeting began with my mother thanking everyone for another profitable year. My chest tightened as board members nodded politely. Then Dad cleared his throat. He started with numbers before he landed a hammer blow. We believe it's time for Cole to step aside. We're offering a buyout of $50,000. The table fell silent. $50,000. For 20 years of blood, sweat, and vision. I smiled, stayed calm. My pulse pounded louder than any betrayal. My sister Laura spoke next, her tone clinical. Cole's been focused on his startup venture instead of our family business. That's his choice, but shareholders deserve clarity. My brother nodded. My uncle smirked. I stayed curious, circling the perimeter of rage. Lines drawn across the glossy table. My name in black. Theirs in red. I looked at my hands. Clenched or open? I chose open. I said nothing. I didn't have to. Their next move spoke for them. They handed me the paperwork. 3 pages, dotted lines, corporate speak. I scanned it. A valuation based on projected profits, not actual value. I'd build 2 businesses in the same time frame. It was condescension by numbers. I signed it like a contract. Not with pen, but with forgiveness, not for them, for me. The signatures fell like cordwood. Uncle, sister, father. Mine came last. I pushed the packet across the table. They shook hands. They toasted family legacy. I sipped, politely. The room buzzed with celebration. They laughed and raised glasses. To the next generation, Dad said, then clapped me on the shoulder. I looked around, faces beaming, thinking tonight was their victory. My smile curved, polite, until it dropped. I warmed their champagne glass, tasted betrayal. This was their inheritance, one I helped build. Now they thought me expendable. Their victory looked empty, hollow. The kind you feel when your name is issued in past tense. Mine was already over. I left without a word. The hallway outside echoed with applause behind closed doors. I took the stairs down to the garage, 2 flights, past polished portraits of ancestors I'd never lived up to. I got into my car and sat for a minute. I wasn't devastated. I was calculating. Losing wasn't shocking. Losing the illusion of loyalty was. I pulled out my phone and hit draft email. I didn't know the next move yet. But I knew the game had changed. 2 hours later, I was on the highway. I needed space to breathe, to think. I cranked indie rock and watched the trees pass. The weight of the day pressed behind my eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt energized. Their arrogance would be the fuel for my ascension. Family legacy meant nothing against cold ambition. I was hungry. I turned my phone back on and checked email. 1 message, subject, confidential, term sheet LOI. My drive slowed as I opened it. The header read, Prospective merger discussion between Cole Rivers Tech and Maple Systems. I scrolled. The offer, $20 million valuation, majority stake, terms that included full creative and operational control. I stared at the numbers. My curves. Their signatures still hung in the garage. My heartbeat aligned with the LEDs blinking on my dashboard. My family thought they were buying me out cheaply. They didn't know I'd already built an empire with someone else's money. I parked on the shoulder, forward-leaning, heart racing. This wasn't just a merger proposal, it was a strategic invitation. They'd handed me nothing, but this gave me leverage. Leverage to come back, but from a different side. I thought of that buyout check, stacked under a frame waiting for my printer. I thought of the boardroom, faces turned toward me, thinking they'd broken me. I could come back with this deal. Not as heir. As master. I stuffed the phone back into my pocket. I restarted the drive home, the road unspooling ahead like a promise. My mind was already drafting presentation slides, gathering legal counsel, investor emails. This was no accident. Someone knew my value better than my own family. I thought of my lawyer, Jenna Chu, smart, ruthless, connected. The next step, meeting her first thing Monday. If Rivers Industries thought they'd won, they were wrong. They just fueled my revenge. By the time I pulled into my driveway, night had fallen. The shadows felt like allies. I opened the PDF attachment labeled Term Sheet, Confidential. My vision went blurry with adrenaline and purpose. They laughed when they cut me off, but now a whisper in courtrooms, an announcement in boardrooms. That term sheet would be the curtain call. They would pay for every slight. I tapped the PDF opened, breathed deep, and smiled. Their buyout had just become their reckoning. As soon as I got home, I called Jenna Chu, the M&A attorney I'd kept in my contacts since my days hustling startup funding. She answered almost immediately. "Send it now," she said, voice cool as polished steel. I attached the 2-page term sheet and paused. Then I pressed send. She replied within minutes. "This is powerful, majority stake, board control, full IP rights. We need funding lined up, but this can move fast." I felt a thrill. For the first time since that board vote, I was grabbing control on terms I chose, with players they hadn't even met. My next move was tapping my investor network, angel syndicates, and VC connections I'd built in secret. They were ready. Within 24 hours, I had 3 firms confirming interest. But I didn't tell them about Rivers Industries. I told them I was merging with a legacy manufacturer. If any of those board members caught wind, they'd suspect a takeover. That opacity would give me the edge. Jenna cautioned on non-competes and confidentiality clauses, especially ones buried deep in my original buyout. But she assured me we could push back or buy them out. It was building into something dangerously beautiful. Over the next 2 mornings, I met her in her office. We dissected every clause, the right of first refusal, the confidentiality maintenance for 36 months. She said it was typical for cautious family-run businesses. I nodded. I didn't want typical. My strategy: use their own terms to force negotiation. If they refused, I would push for court approval on non-compete limitations. If that failed, I'd leverage investors to walk directly to board seats, elevating pressure. We drafted a letter of intent that included a conditional clause granting me CEO status contingent on performance. The storm was taking shape. By Wednesday afternoon, half my investor pool had signed NDAs. Emails flew. Calls scheduled. Pitch decks polished. I wasn't rushing, just accelerating. Jenna prepared a clean version of the letter of intent to forward to Rivers's board. She kept it tactical. "We believe this merger benefits both entities, strengthens competitive position, and enhances shareholder value." But behind herd of legalese was leverage. If they took the deal, I'd wield power inside the company that once relegated me to the dust. If they refused, I'd call their bluff and press. Either way, I wasn't the exile. They were. That evening, I reached out to a few trusted board members, old mentors in the local community. I didn't mention Rivers. I said, imagine your company, but armed with new product lines and modern agile tech. Better infrastructure. Bigger market share. Their replies came back. Intrigue, interest, cautious optimism. Jenna advised me not to push too fast. Let them chase the idea, she said. Make them consider what they're missing. This phase was delicate. Showing value without showing teeth. I responded with facts, my metrics, projections, team strength. Meanwhile, Jenna was working the back end. She filed an intention notice and trademark registration for Rivers Maple Tech, a preemptive move. She also drafted a draft coalition agreement outlining payment flow, board composition, startup purchase exchanges, IP licensing, everything. I reviewed and redlined it until it felt bulletproof. By the time the weekend hit, I had a full merger package ready for the board, asking them to decide between being acquired by me or competing against me with half their own assets. Confidence in pocket, I slept the first good sleep I'd had in months. Monday morning, Jenna emailed the draft. Subject: LOI. Rivers Maple Tech merger proposal. She copied their corporate secretary. I watched my inbox refresh. No bounce. No immediate refusal. I felt electric. Around midday, I saw Jen return email. She added, "We're ready when you are." It was clinical, sharp, final. The board had a legal ball in play. I closed Outlook and leaned back. The merger hunt had begun. Their game, but on my terms. I turned off notifications and went for a long run. My legs pounded pavement as I processed the magnitude of what I'd done. I'd taken their nobility and offered them the choice: merge up or stay behind. Their pride would struggle. Their legacy might crumble. I realized revenge wasn't always about tearing down. It was about rewriting the rules so they couldn't tear me down again. The run cleared my mind, but my pulse kept thumping with anticipation. They had no clue what was coming. By dusk, I was in the co-working loft converting it into my war room. Whiteboards on wheels, drafting strategy flows, funding timelines, board seating proposals, fallback escalation triggers. I ran scenarios, this, and this. Jenna had done the legal heavy lifting. I would provide the pressure, but I wanted to know the plan. When we received their legal reply, I had a matrix of responses. My investors would await directions. I was ready. That night, the board chairman, my Uncle Edward, left me a voicemail. Terse, let's talk. My heart stuttered. They were calling. Jenna dialed whispers of caution. Don't answer until we prep. I deleted the voicemail alert unread and stared at the boardroom map. I rewrote lines, planned the negotiation next day. I knew they were coming to me. I prepared to look calm. When it came, I would offer them the door back in, with clauses that kept me in control. The merger would either be their greatest triumph or their worst miscalculation. The storm wasn't here yet. It was drafting on the horizon, but they could feel it. I could feel it. Under the code and curves of legal terms, I had built my path back to the table. They'd cut me out, but I'd carved my own entry. Now the real test began. The reunion felt like a coronation they'd already won. My family gathered at the coastal cabin, waves crashing in the distance, laughter echoing lightly across the deck. Board members of Rivers Industries were here under the guise of weekend retreat, but everyone knew it was PR gold. I arrived just after lunch, carrying a cooler. My presence prompted polite smiles. They believed I came to celebrate. I was wearing the same clothing I'd worn to the boardroom vote. Casual, composed. The same outfit they had laughed at. By afternoon, sun rays glinted off the dock as I helped launch the pontoon boat. Cousin Laura nudged me. She chuckled. So, Cole, gonna call your investors now, or wait for dessert? The question was light, but my pulse thundered beneath my skin. I smiled widely. Maybe after dessert. She shrugged, expected banter. I walked away. On the way back, I caught Dad's eyes, narrowed, confused. My bluff had worked. He still couldn't read me out. But tonight, I'd make them pay for that. That evening's dinner was flanked by lanterns and wine. Laughter trickled among them until Jenna Chu, my M&A lawyer, strode in carrying a leather folder. Silence spread in seconds. I had told Jenna nothing before her entrance. This moment was her stage. She placed the folder on the table's center. I snapped toward me. I cleared my throat. I trust everyone's enjoying the weekend, I said, voice calm. I've brought an update. I waved at Jenna. She nodded, unzipped the folder, and said, "We'd like to propose a merger outlined in this." The room froze. Laura's glass slipped from her hand. Board members exchanged glances. Plates clattered softly. Jenna continued. Cole Rivers would become lead partner and CEO of the combined entity. Rivers Maple Tech. I watched people digest those words like they were poison. My mom's smile vanished. Dad's face hardened. The chairman's jaw clenched. I looked down at my plate, drained me slowly. But it was electric. The moment they dismissed me, I built a knife. Tonight, I held it at their throats. Questions tumbled. My mother stammered. You talked to my investors? Jenna responded smoothly. Preliminary LOI circulated under NDA. They support this. Board members leaned forward. Collars tightened. One woman muttered into her napkin, "This no notice?" We were never informed. Jenna replied, "Timeline reflects standard confidentiality, which Rivers Maple will formalize." I understand your surprise. The war chamber shift happened in real time. I waited for their fury, but first came silence. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for his wine. I watched. He hadn't flinched at my buyout vote. But this cut deeper. The chairs were too close, the lanterns too bright. Dad raised his glass and swallowed carefully. Mom's eyes darted wetly. My brother looked amused. My sister looked stunned. Laura's nails clicked on her glass. Jenna slid the folder toward them. It felt like the presentation of blood on silk. I soaked in the rise of panic behind their calm. Board Chairman, Mark Rivers, cleared his throat. His voice was low, clipped. This isn't standard procedure. Jenna remained composed. Standard when one party controls key patents and funding lines. We believe this is exactly the proper move. He turned to Dad. Dad surveyed the group, then lowered his gaze. The wine glass shook. He stood. Then it happened. He raised his glass and tilted too quickly. Red wine splashed across the ivory rug and crept toward Jenna's briefcase. The entire dining table froze. The moment quaked. Board members looked frantic. Dad's face went pale. He preserved the glass standing on its table. Jenna closed her briefcase. I leaned back. The storm was here. The silence was their admission. They couldn't call my bluff. They were blindsided, unarmed. Only then did Mark speak. We need to discuss the details now. His voice was flat. Not negotiation, but initiation. Everyone moved. Chairs scrubbed over floorboards. I watched Dad steady himself. He looked at me, not with contempt, but with fear. I imagined he saw everything I'd become in that instant. CEO, acquirer, predator, not the son they pushed aside. The merger had become a mirror. They repaired the spill. The dinner resumed awkwardly. My mom dabbed tears. Dad's hands shook. Conversation resumed, but the air was saturated. Not joy, but uncertainty. I sipped water. My throat felt dry. I didn't need to say more. The wine spill had sealed it. My presence wasn't participation now, it was execution. They'd built the funeral pyre. I had lit it. And tonight they saw flames. After dinner, Jenna and I walked outside. Moonlight glinting on the sea, waves rolling like tail lights. Jenna whispered, "Now we wait for response." I nodded. My heart still roared. They didn't know what hit them, but I did. I said quietly, "Let them think night will give them clarity. Tomorrow, they'll have to respond." She smiled, hands steady on the LOI. I turned toward the cabin. On the deck, I watched silhouettes, my family, friends, and board members breaking into urgent whispers. Their weekend retreat had turned into a battlefield. I stepped back inside, glanced at Dad's reflection in the hallway window. One glass of wine stained on the rug beneath him. He looked haunted. I closed my eyes. Reunion was always their stage. They never guessed my strategy. Tonight, it unraveled. Tomorrow, negotiations would begin or lawsuits. But I was ready. I hadn't just turned tables. I built the table on mine. Negotiations began in the boardroom the Monday after the cabin reveal. Rivers Industries' legal counsel took their seats. Across from them, Jinichu and my small team. The table was lined with documents, patent filings, real estate appraisals, contract drafts. Rivers Industries owned warehouses, patents for water purification tech, long-term vendor agreements. It added up to millions. My draft LOI included a merger flip. I'd take 60% ownership, become CEO, and roll Rivers' assets into Maple Systems. It was ambitious, but they had leverage. Their assets. My strategy. Their lawyer opened. "You used confidential documents during your startup pitch. We won't tolerate that." My jaw clenched. Jenna stood to speak. All documentation was independently developed and sourced from public records. "We can prove it." She slid a binder across the table, emails detailing our research, timestamps, NDA compliance logs. The Rivers attorney flipped through it, brow furrowed. He countered with implied threat of injunction. Jenna responded with subpoenas. They realized they'd underestimated our legal clarity. The board's tension climbed. My mother's voice broke as she asked for a break. She wanted privacy. She lingered near me and whispered, "Family matters. Can't we settle?" My eyes didn't leave the lawyer. I responded, softly, "We can. If they sign." The room paused. Their lawyer recovered. "We need assurances." Jenna leaned forward. We offer a one-time legacy clause, a buyout guarantee for your parents, full payout no matter what. But lawsuits must be dropped. She placed it on the table. Silence fell. Over the next hours, the room convulsed in legal back and forth. Board votes, escrow timing, IP licensing. Subpoenas were threatened for sensitive financial records. I listened. My blood pounded. This was the turning point. I remained still as the sound of suit shuffling documents crashed over me. Jenna held firm. Finally, the board chairman called a private vote. The door closed. I felt the air thicken. My mother's tears were distant now, filtered through legal drama, but no less real. When the door opened, the chairman announced, 7 in favor, 1 opposed. My heart surged. 7 votes for merger flip, 1 no. I scanned faces. My older sister Jorge nodded. My siblings, board members, determined. The opponent, Mom. She looked me in the eye. I offered the legacy clause again. She shook her head, voice soft. It's too much. My mother's tears weren't begging anymore. They were remorse. My father stood still. The room held its breath. Her rejection hung in the air. Jenna seized the moment. Your parents are protected. The clause guarantees payout. But you must withdraw all legal actions. Board chaos followed. The Rivers attorney coughed. My mother sat, crying silently. The board chairman said, we accept the clause, but the lawsuits proceed. This closes the deal, not the court cases. Jenna's eyes pierced him. That's not acceptable. The fight surged again. Minutes stretched. I remained still. This would define everything. At dusk, negotiations resumed. The chairman tried to balance family reputations and shareholder expectations. Jenna stood firm. Finally, he relented. The clause stood. Lawsuits would be settled via arbitration. My mother, still tearful, signed once we agreed. In that moment, I realized it wasn't about winning. It was about who got to write the story. I looked at her. I never stopped being your son. She looked away. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Late that night, I left the boardroom with a signed LOI, stamped and sealed. Rivers Maple Tech was official. My investors got a copy. Jenna held the legacy clause in her folder. I felt a hollow peace. I'd beaten them at their own game. Legal leverage, financial rigor, strategic ruthlessness. Revenge had fused into victory, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. I texted Jenna, draft merger notices. Timeline. She replied, dawn meeting. The clause had passed. Now execution awaited. I drove past the shuttered Rivers Industries lot, now subject to my merger. Lights dimmed. Buildings silent. A symbol of what they lost. Later, I returned home and emptied the safe deposit box. Inside, the original buyout papers from last June. I watched the ink fade under light. I placed them next to my CEO plaque. The papers were worthless now. But the memory was sharp. This was the blueprint they had drafted for my exit. Now they sealed my return. At 2 a.m., I woke to a text. Your mother is in the ER. My heart stopped. Jenna called. She didn't know details. I rushed out into the night. Everything I'd built seemed fragile. Legacy clause, merger flips, board votes. It meant nothing if my mother collapsed. I drove faster, mind racing. I realized this entire strategy, this revenge, had been predicated on logic. But blood didn't follow logic. It wore its own rules. I pulled into the hospital parking lot, breath ragged. The boardroom storm was over, but the personal storm still raged. Merger day arrived with an electric calm. Morning light broke through the glass facade of the new Rivers Maple Tech headquarters. Employees buzzed in suits. Clients filled seats. Reporters framed the room. I stepped onto the stage to sign the final merger documents as CEO, my name and title. Everything I'd built squeezed into those pages. The pen felt warm in my hand. As I signed, I envisioned the old boardroom, my father's gaze, my mother's tears, replaced with my own triumph. I was no longer the sideline heir. I was the lead. Applause rolled through the crowd. The chairman shook my hand. Clients offered congratulations. Investors praised the synergy. The media flashed cameras. They called it a shock-turned-success story. I maintained composure, but my heart raced. This was more than a business win. It was validation. The board members who dismissed me were now passing me mics and stapled contracts. Behind every handshake was a reversal of expectations. In that moment, I felt vindicated, not with bitterness, but with quiet satisfaction. I rose above my former reputation. Later, I toured the empty boardroom, the same tables, the same leather chairs, the same oak panels. Except now, the nameplate on the desk read Cole Rivers, CEO. I ran my hand across the surface, as if laying claim. I remembered last year's buyout vote, the cold coffee, the stale atmosphere. Today, this room held new energy, innovation, leadership, anticipation. I envisioned future meetings, strategy sessions centered on me. The room was no longer stone. It was foundation. And I would build something here that legacy couldn't ignore. Press conference followed. Microphones lined the podium. Questions flew about share value, future projections, board composition. I answered smoothly. No arrogance, just confidence. I maintained calm authority while demonstrating transparency. I spoke of unity, growth, and technological modernization. Reporters scribbled. Cameras focused. I felt no internal strain. They expected chaos. They got clarity. I delivered fortunes in words that didn't sting. As I exited, smiles trailed me. Deal closed. Points scored. My family's empire had become mine to run on its own terms. Back in my office, windows looked out over the factory yards and tech labs. I unlocked the safe deposit box just once more. Inside lay the buyout letter, the $50,000 offer, cheap and final. I held it for a moment. The ink had faded, but the insult remained. I slid it onto the desk under a weighted paper tray. Then I closed the box and locked it. I'd lived that chapter, but I refused to carry it forward. That paper would rest in silence, a relic of dismissal. I sat at the desk and looked around. This space was mine now, no shadows, no whispered doubts. My phone buzzed, texts from investors, new board member notifications, congratulations from old mentors. Even my mother texted, "Proud of you." I didn't reply. Words weren't necessary. They already heard the message. I opened the drawer and fetched a small tripod, my phone. I held it out and pressed record. Background, the office, empty, waiting. I said clearly, into the lens, they handed me nothing. So I built everything. I paused. They laughed when I said I was busy. They said I wasted time. They thought I'd fade. Instead, I rose. My shoulders squared. This is for anyone who's been underestimated. Build the base when they're not watching. Then step forward and take the stage they never built. I ended the shot, silent for a moment. I saved the video, quiet justice captured in focus. I spent the rest of the day meeting board members and staff, listening more than speaking. I wanted to lay groundwork for growth, not revenge. I introduced new initiatives, incentives for innovation. I announced investments in R&D and community outreach. I wanted change that lasted. But I also wanted legacy, my kind. One built on merit and forward motion, not hereditary entitlement. Already, the shift was happening. Ideas ignited, teams energized. My empire was under construction. By evening, I left the office. The building lights flicked off floor by floor behind me. I walked into the dark parking garage, alone with my echo. I looked down at the safe lock glinting in the half-light. The past was sealed. I climbed into my car, the leather steering wheel comfortable under my hands. I thought of my parents, where they be tonight, facing their own finish lines. This wasn't spite. It was evolution. I gave the wheel a squeeze. Tomorrow was mine. That night, I sat on the porch of my home, overlooking my startup's lab across the street. Stars glimmered overhead. I felt exhaustion, sharp and real, but also clarity. I had refused their world, built a bigger one, and become its leader, all without vengeance. Instead, I rewrote every definition of failure they'd assigned me. I raised a silent glass, to proof instead of pride. They laughed when I said I was busy. They never imagined I was building an empire under their name. Some families will write you off until your signature shows up on their paychecks. If you found that story as satisfying as I did telling it, there are more where that came from. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, drop a comment below. Your silence doesn't make you weak. It makes your comeback that much louder. See you soon in the next story.